An immigration expert reports from a Mexican city that's been overrun by migrants and how their problem could soon become ours. Kamala Harris pushes for an appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, and the creator of the MAGA Index will tell you how to vote with your dollar and stop giving money to companies that hate you. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. To the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Wednesday, October 16th. With the possibility of a Trump presidency next year, are migrants rushing to the southern border? I'm joined by Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Todd Bensman. He's a senior national security fellow for the Center for Immigration Studies, and he's been in Mexico for a while right now. So tell us what you've seen there on the ground, Todd.
Right. Right now I'm standing in front of the Rio Suchiate, which is the border between Guatemala and Mexico. And not far from me is the city of Tapachula, where there are 150,000 immigrants trapped behind a militarized cordon, Mexican military operation to kind of hem them in, to keep them from creating a political spectacle at our border. This goes back to a deal that was done in December of 2023 in order to, reduce the total numbers that were being seen crossing and driving the polls down. So 150,000 is an astronomical number that are hemmed up here in this enclave, this migrant kind of Gaza Strip, if you will, until at least I think about November 5th or 6th. I think the deal is probably good at least until then, at which point the Mexicans could then decide to release them, because this is a major burden for the Mexicans to have this many migrants in one place. They're also doing this in another city in a nearby state, Tabasco State, city of Villahermosa. And what they do is they are rounding up migrants from the northern provinces and shipping them down here. And at the same time, thousands are crossing in from Guatemala still, pile driving into Tapachula. So that's the situation down here. And the big question is, when will they be released?
Todd, this is one of the biggest stories of the election. Are there any other journalists down there covering it?
Not that I've seen. I'm unaware of anybody down here. Happy to be the only one in Tapachula for such a major story. Professionally, it's great to sort of own this thing. But on the other hand, I think it's kind of bad for America that nobody's here. This is a diplomatic story. It's a political campaign story. And it's a human interest story. My God, the people that are coming through here are in absolute torment being in Tapachula, because they've used up all the available resources. The people are sleeping on the streets. There's no room in shelters. There's no room in the hotels, and they just keep pile driving in because they fear that Donald Trump is going to win. All day yesterday and the day before, they were telling me about, they're absolutely panicking that they can't get into the United States in case Donald Trump wins, because he's going to close the gate. He's going to shut the border. So, there's a real sense of urgency among the immigrants here, and they've started to form caravans to kind of force their way out of Tapachula to escape Tapachula. That movie called Escape from New York. This is Escape from Tapachula going on, and I was with a caravan all day long yesterday of about 1,000 people. I don't know if that's video that I took, but there's about another 1,000 or 2,000 forming up right now in downtown Tapachula to get ready to push on to another city down here, providing that the Mexican military will let them pass. I don't think right now they're letting them pass, not until the 5th, at least.
Yeah, Todd, it is video from your X account. You've had so many videos and images. Everybody needs to go follow you there. But one of the questions that I have, you're talking with the immigrants that are down there. Where are they coming from? When they do get there, are they the usual suspects of Central America, or are these people from all over the world trying to get into this caravan?
They're from all over the world. This morning, I met my first Vietnamese. They're staying in my hotel. The hotel is filled with Armenians, with people from the Philippines, Filipinos. I've met people from Togo and Ghana, Cameroon, you name it. They're from all over the world here, in addition to Hondurans and Salvadorans and the rest. People are coming in. They're coming in right now. I mean, I'm looking at rafts just filled. They're coming in from Tucunaman, right over across the river there, and they just come in day and night, filling Tapachula even more. And all of them just sort of keep coming with this hope that soon the Mexicans will relent and let them through. And that's the big question. Will the Mexicans relent on the deal that they made with Biden at that time he was running for office? So I would say the Biden-Harris campaign.
So in the event of a Biden-Harris victory, could you spell out for us a little bit about what you think would happen?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. One is that whatever the deal was that they struck back in December, nobody really knows what the terms of the deal was, except that it definitely had to do with the mass migration. In December, there were 14,000 a day crossing our border. It was absolutely untenable. And something had to be done. And what they did was come down here and do it. So I don't know if they offered money or threatened them with something. But the chances are pretty good that the threat will be sort of ended, or the money or whatever was paid, the terms will have been reached as of November 5th, because numbers are down to where they were when Trump was in office. The ones that are crossing illegally, now they're flying them in by the hundreds of thousands, and they're walking them in over the land ports too by the hundreds of thousands, so you can't see them, but there are a lot of ways to get people into the United States, short of them having to cross illegally now. The ones that aren't going to go by air and aren't going to get the CBP-1, they're here in Tapachula. They would be crossing illegally right now, 150,000 of them, and still coming all the time. I think that they'll be released. That's what I think is going to happen sometime in between the election and the transition.
So, Todd,
the new administration.
I mean, the insanity of this, that it's not being covered, is, I mean, we're old enough to remember, all of us here, when kids in cages were a terrible thing. Now it's hundreds of thousands of kids can go missing and it's fine. Here you have cities in cages, right? I mean, you're putting people in these cities, and not a single person is talking about this in legacy media. It's insane. Say more about the conditions there.
Well, I'm going to steal that city in cages thing. I've been trying to come up with a new something, Gaza Strip. I don't know. I'm stealing that. It's terrible. The people who are forming in these caravans are desperate to get out to any other city but Tapachula, because it's absolutely picked clean. If you come here with, a certain budget from your home country, and you find that you're stuck here trying to get some visa that never shows up, pretty soon you're out of money, and you're kind of like on your own to try to feed yourself and your wife and kids, or whoever is with you. And that's the situation. People are hungry in that town. They're doing all these side hustles, selling little fruit stands, fruits and vegetables, and sleeping in the streets. There is significant crime. Everybody I talk to is complaining about these extortionists, and the Sinaloa cartel is down here. There are theft gangs that are organized, that are just preying on all these people. People are getting murdered. It's a terrible situation, according to the immigrants. And they want to just be able to move anywhere except home. I mean, home is still an option for them. I mean, this is something that is working for the U.S. border. The numbers are down because, they're holding them here, but, they ought to be having some kind of an incentive program to move them home from here so that they, can't just indefinitely, pile up in these cities here. So I don't know what they're going to do, but they should not be released to the U.S. border, in my opinion, because we're going to have a humanitarian crisis the day that happens.
Well, Todd, you are the immigration expert. You actually wrote the book on it. It's called Overrun. So tell people about it and where they can get it.
Sure. Overrun came out last year. It's based on my first 2.5 years of covering this particular mass migration crisis, the greatest in U.S. history. It's the only book that gives you soup to nuts how this thing started and how to get out of it and what it looked like on the ground. This is not my first time here in Tapachula, that's for sure. It's the most immigrants I've ever seen, though, by far in this town. I've been here probably 5 or 6 different times. The book is available anywhere books are sold, bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere like that. And if you don't understand how you got into this, you can't understand how to get out of it.
Thanks so much for all of the information today and for what you're bringing here just to the American people. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Matthew, I almost couldn't believe some of the things that he was talking about there. And just to know that is happening and that it's, basically all in line with the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage people to follow him on X if you have an X account, to follow his account, Todd Bensman, with CIS, because they're doing amazing work. And what's really disgusting about this, what's really disturbing about it to me, is how much smoke and mirrors there is, right? I mean, this is an actual story. This is real. This is actually happening. Something like this deal was made, and we're not going to see that in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, and we're going to bring it to you right here live from the internet.
Absolutely. When we come back, we'll be talking about, can Kamala Harris be Joe Rogan's next podcast guest? Chris Bedford will explain her campaign's Hail Mary coming up. Well, you can tell there's a lot at stake in this upcoming election, but regardless of who's sitting in the White House, the fuse on the economy has already been lit. Even 4 years of a conservative presidency will not be enough to turn the tide on our $35 trillion national debt. And if the left wins, it's like throwing gas on a dumpster fire. Now, we don't have too much control over who wins the election, but you can do right now is protect your savings by diversifying into gold with the help of Birch Gold Group. For millennia, gold has stood firm in the face of greedy governments, economic upheavals, and global strife, and it can protect you right now. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA of physical gold. It's tax-free, penalty-free, and it doesn't cost you a penny out of your pocket. In the past 4 years, the buying power of the US dollar has declined, and the price of gold has increased 40%. Do you think that's a coincidence? Text the word Jill to 989898 and get your free info kit on gold, and trust Birch Gold to protect your savings. Text Jill to the number 989898 today. In his latest Beltway brief, Blaze Media senior politics editor and DC correspondent Chris Bedford wrote about Kamala Harris's recent media blitz and a possible upcoming appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. But can any of this salvage her dwindling poll numbers? He joins us now to discuss all this. So, Chris, what can you tell us about Kamala's media frenzy, and will this have a big impact on voters?
Well, so far, it hasn't really gone the direction the Democrats want. I mean, last week, basically starting last Friday, a week from last Friday, she started this media blitz, which is really the first time that she'd been out in public and really been allowed to start going off script, aside from a few very short supported interviews. And the polling that came back showed actually a shift, and they were all away from her. More voters disliked her. And what's interesting about that is the people who are watching The View and the people who... a lot of these folks, the audience, people who turn into Stephen Colbert, they're not really undecided people. A lot of them kind of have political points of view. Well, maybe Republicans, a lot of Republican women may have watched The View in the 90s. That has long since shifted, or maybe even during Meghan McCain's time there, that has long since shifted in the last couple of years. It's an extremely liberal show. And still, maybe through a combination of her clips going viral on the internet, her poll numbers started to go in the bad way. Now, it looks to me that they're pretty clearly willing to try anything at this point. They don't want to be a campaign that sticks only to one script, especially when that script is going the wrong direction for them. So now they're reaching out, and this evening she had an interview with Bret Baier, which is not exactly an interview with us or an interview with Tucker Carlson, so you're not going to get the kind of pushback. The Fox News side of things is actually kind of more straight, and they do like that respectability that they get from some of their liberal colleagues. But it's not a firm interview there. And the real thing, though, is a woman who really can't keep conversation for more than a few seconds. Someone who is not very natural and at ease is reportedly pitching the Joe Rogan show, which would be a couple-hour conversation with a kind of a off-the-wall thinker who's going to try and talk to her like a normal person and get her relaxed. And that one shows a desperation that is just so completely opposite from anything that the Harris campaign has been doing before. It shows that their poll numbers are worse than what we're seeing in public.
Yeah, Chris, that's the one that I can't. It just seems like that would be a backbreaker. I mean, it's everything about her that's terrible will be on full display. What are the chances of that actually happening, do you think?
So Joe Rogan's the kind of guy, he doesn't like to interview people who have their own platforms. You see a lot of really interesting scientists and doctors on that show. You see a lot of interesting thinkers. But the interesting thing about it is no matter how plugged into weird ideas you are, you're going to hear names that you've never heard listed with some frequency as the upcoming guest that Joe Rogan has picked for one of the top programs in the country. And that's because he likes to give people a platform who do not have their own. He's pushed back on some people I know, personal friends who had powerful soapboxes. And he says, nah, I'm not really interested in interviewing you, even though you're a very interesting person, because I just don't think that you've got that much new to say that you haven't already said in your own platform. So but he's also seems to be kind of reluctantly taking on his role as a kingmaker. Now, supposedly willing to interview Donald Trump. If he does that, and he's going to want to have to interview Kamala Harris. And a guy like him don't expect hard-hitting stuff. He's not going to try and get the gotcha questions. He's going to try and delve into who you are and what you really believe and what you think. And that's a place that Kamala Harris is really unbelievably weak.
Bedford, let's stick with her. I sent you a post on X earlier today saying with the Dan O'Donnell show, they had an exclusive saying her campaign has dramatically pulled back on local television advertising in the Milwaukee market and reallocating those resources to Philadelphia, where it is believed that the campaign is deeply concerned about turnout and margins there. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think that that's a good decision by them. I mean, when I last toured Milwaukee in 2020, I know the media market is bigger than just the city. There was a surprising number of people who were going to vote Republican than you would normally expect, but it didn't really matter that much. I mean, Minnesota is blue. I mean, Minnesota voted against Ronald Reagan. Minnesota wrote against Richard Nixon. They're one of the very few states out there that's just consistently, maybe it's the Northern European immigration, basically socialists. They're going to back their guy. Pennsylvania, however, which used to be kind of almost a blue state at one point in my life, is now so thoroughly purple and also so thoroughly important to both campaigns. I mean, there really is a very difficult road for either one of them to victory without Pennsylvania, which is a wild thing. And Democrats have pulled out all the stops previously. You've seen Barack Obama going there. You've actually seen him and Hillary Clinton and all the other celebrities going there year after year trying to campaign for Democrats. And trying to shift that, not just getting people to not vote for Donald Trump, but getting people to actually care to come out to vote for Kamala Harris. Well, this shows you that the Democrats are doubling down on what is frankly an important state.
Chris, I want to go back to something. I mean, you see more of it today. We've spoken about it before on the show, but that is the leaks and finger pointing behind the scenes on this campaign. It's already looking remarkable to me. I mean, it's probably only going to get worse that these people are talking. I mean, they are talking to the press and pointing fingers at each other.
Well, it's incestuous. They'll know each other. And the interesting thing is that reporters give people a lot of power in DC. If you have access to some of the top reporters and are able to, that means you're able to get your opinions out there. You're able to get your enemies attacked. You're able to get your allies promoted. And oftentimes you're able to do it with some aura of deniability around whether or not you are behind it. So these people really value their relationships with the press. And at the same time, they all know each other. One of the reasons that DC is so incredibly swampy and annoying with people just asking you when you meet them out at a restaurant or a bar, what do you do for a living? Kind of like right after your name, sometimes even before it, is because so many people do work in the same industry. And that respectability, that reputation goes everywhere. So when folks are looking around feeling embarrassed, and basically 90%, 95% of DC is Democrat. So if you lose to Donald Trump again, you're persona non grata. You've screwed up the country. Your friends in the press don't like you anymore. Your friends in politics think you're a moron. You want to maintain that. You want to show that you're on the right side. And you want to stick your enemies in the back. You want to express your frustration, say, listen, I know there's something wrong here. There's people trying to protect their reputations for afterwards. It's often rats leaving a sinking ship, and it's really poor form.
Chris, we've talked about Donald Trump going to Madison Square Garden. Now a group of Democrats, including Mark Hamill, they've teamed up with the Lincoln Project. No surprise there, honestly. They're all one and the same in my mind. But they're trying to team up and actually sign up to attend the rally so that it makes it look like there's already people in these seats, and just trying to mess with all of that at Madison Square Garden. Do you think any of that is actually going to work?
No, those guys are so incredibly incompetent. I mean, if you go, there's very few people still associated with the Lincoln Project who haven't kind of been pushed out for like kiddie porn or weird things with interns or things like that. These guys are real, even amongst DC politicos, these guys are particularly finger sniffy. And they have all these plans, and they're all about revenge. I mean, if you go to their website, these founders and these top guys, go to their profiles. Their number one thing is we're advertisement makers. Their main anger is that they got cut out of advertisement making. They weren't allowed in on this. Donald Trump didn't pay them. Now they're going to try and ruin things. You have guys like former Luke Skywalker, who's a much better voice actor than he is on screen these days, going out there trying to act like he's still able to move people. It's sad. And at the end of the day, those seats are going to get pretty packed out.
It's sad. And you know what? I think people in our audience are sad that your cat didn't make an appearance on their show today. I think that was the biggest response that we've gotten. So many people reached out to me about your cat yesterday on the show.
He's a hero, and he's really upset with me right now. He's watching me from the window. It's like, it's cold out here.
Yeah, as he should be outside. Thanks so much, Bedford.
See you tomorrow.
The Lincoln Project, Matthew Peterson. There's so much there.
Yeah, well, if Abraham Lincoln was associated with a bunch of evil, terrible things and grift, that name would make sense. But like he said, and Chris had it right, this is revenge. These are bad people, and throwing some washed up old actors in there. I mean, I almost welcome it at this point, because I think it's so obviously ridiculous and unappealing.
I wonder if they're the same people that are trying to make Abraham Lincoln gay. Do you remember we covered that on the show before? It's a whole world out there. When we come back, woke companies are taking your dollars and giving it to Democrats. Our next guest will tell you how to put your money where your vote is. Next. Well, the good news is you don't have to wait until November to vote, because you can vote every single day with your dollar at goodranchers.com. Make a powerful choice for American meat, supporting American agriculture, and making your voice heard for transparency in our food. Good Ranchers, of course, sources their meat exclusively from American farms. It supports local ranchers and ensures that you receive high-quality American-raised meat with no antibiotics, no hormones, no seed oils ever. And by shopping from goodranchers.com, you're making a statement about the kind of values that you stand for. It's quality, hard work, dedication to the American tradition. And right now, Good Ranchers is having a presidential promo. So for a limited time, you can get an add-on for a whole 4 years. And that means when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you decide if you want that extra plain chicken breast, Angus ground beef, apple smoked with bacon, or wild-caught salmon in your order for 4 years. It's the perfect way to ensure that you have high-quality American meat in your kitchen. Every cut is pre-trimmed and individually packed and vacuum sealed, which makes your life easier. It's no wasted food because of poor or storage packaging. Good Ranchers helps you get the most flavor and value out of every ounce of meat you buy. And in this economy, that matters more each day. So don't miss out. Use my code Jill to claim this presidential promo worth over $1,200 and also claim $25 off your first box plus free express shipping and 100% American meat to your family meals through 2028. It's goodranchers.com, code Jill. Goodranchers.com, American meat delivered. The Senate fundraising numbers are in, and it's not great for Republicans. Democrats raised 2.5 times as much money. It's $203 million to the GOP's $83 million. So here to discuss is Hal Lambert. He's the founder of Point Bridge Capital, and he created the MAGA stock index and politically responsible investing strategy. So Hal, how do the Democrats they always seem to lead Republicans in fundraising? Why does this happen year after year?
Well, I think there's a few reasons, actually. I think one, their Act Blue system, which is where they go to contribute online. I think it's been around longer than the Republican side, and I think it's just better in general. And you know, let's face it, they have the social media companies, the large ones. They can push that message out. They know everything about all of us, so they know what buttons to push to get people to give money, and that's a huge advantage. I don't think people talk about that enough, but you know, Google and Facebook and Instagram and all these things out there, all the social media, they know all about us, and the Democrats can use that to help raise money. We're cut off from that. They're obviously not going to help us with that. We've got to recreate it ourselves and try to do it ourselves, and I think that's the other big advantage. And then finally, you've got to be really wealthy to be a Democrat these days. I mean, the ultra wealthy are Democrats. Now, of course, there's Elon Musk that's come on board just recently, right? Just very recently. But other than that, all the ultra wealthy people in this country, they're all giving money mostly to the Democrats. There's a handful on the Republican side, but you know, Mark Zuckerberg and those guys stepped up huge in 2020. There always seem to be multiple billionaires that are ready to write any size check to keep those policies in place that they like.
Yeah, let's talk about this with Musk, because it seems like it's something that ties maybe to some of the other things we're going to talk about today, which is this surge in at least a few people at that level coming out for Trump. And it seems like Musk is obviously the biggest dog, right, who has come out. But there's other people in tech who have come out for Trump, and it's remarkable because most people at that level do not. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it shows you how scary Kamala Harris's policies must be, right? I mean, for them to come out and do this for the first time, as you said, a number of tech people, they've had some really high dollar fundraisers in San Francisco this time around for Donald Trump, which didn't happen before, but that's because specifically some of these tech guys have come out in support of him. And again, I think they're looking at it going, this is crazy, these policies. You know, let's start with, you know, taxing unrealized capital gains. That's going to hit a lot of these people, and you know, it makes no sense. I mean, you're really just destroying companies when you do that. If you're going to force the sale of stocks or private companies, how do you even pay the tax if you have a private company? What do you sell? So those policies and those types of things, I think, have really driven people away from Kamala Harris, especially on the economic side.
Now, you're not new to this game. You've been around for a long time, but you did create the MAGA ETF. So what led you to create that?
Well, yeah, I've been in the investment business a very long time. I launched my firm, Point Bridge Capital, about 11 years ago. And I started to realize, look, there's nothing out there on the conservative side. And really what kind of, you know, spurred me to do this was I'm sitting in my office one morning, and it came out on the news that Target was going to open their restrooms to transgender, their dressing rooms. It didn't matter what gender you were. It was open for all of that. And I thought, wow, this is not going to be good for the stock. I actually owned it for client portfolios, and I sold it that morning. And sure enough, there were protests and people coming out against, you know, Target. We've seen it with Nike and Disney and other companies. I thought, you know, guys, they're out there protesting. They don't realize they own these same stocks in their mutual funds at their 401ks in different places. And I started looking at, well, there's nothing out there on the Republican side. There was all these Democrat funds, the ESG funds and all of that have been out there for a long time. Zero on the Republican side. And so I started looking at it. I was like, well, how do I create something for people to invest in based on their political ideology? And that's what spurred it. And I launched it. It's now been over 7 years ago. Ticker is MAGA. So that was nice timing. It actually won Ticker of the Year in 2017, which I was very surprised about, considering it was a New York-based group that was giving those awards out. But I don't think it'd win today. MAGA's too controversial today, but it did win back then, and it's done really well. It's been a great opportunity and an offer for people to be able to invest in.
I think this is incredibly important for everyone out there to hear, that people like you are doing this and to think about in their own lives. And I mean, I suppose the way in which what you're talking about is really people's money being hijacked by the other side. So, even in your 401k, these pension funds, these states, they're taking your money and using it politically. And I mean, as you know, that's difficult for the right to think about finance this way. But I believe firmly we have to if we're going to win. So talk a little bit about politically responsible investing. What do you mean by that?
Well, it was kind of a play on socially responsible investing, which had been around for a while, which was the whole soft thing, which is, hey, this isn't about shareholders, this is about stakeholders, and we've got to take into account everybody in the world on what decisions we're going to make as a company. And it really was detrimental to shareholders. And political responsibility, I'm like, people need to be responsible with their money, make investments that support the companies that they're supporting. And you're seeing this more and more today, right? We're seeing a lot of commercials now with a new credit card company that's now going to focus on conservative. I was 7 years ahead of the game, I think, from the standpoint of that. And you're starting to see people do that with their money. They realize, look, I need to be supporting businesses that have my views. There's a few monopolies out there we can't get away from. That's what's frustrating. Obviously, Apple's very left, right? So most of us have iPhones. The other choice is Samsung. But who knows? Maybe we'll have an X phone with Elon Musk soon, right? He's talked about it. So hopefully there's going to be other options. Luckily, for us, X, he did buy Twitter. So we're going to hold up some free speech there. But look, it was getting really dark out there for conservatives. We just didn't have a lot of places to turn. And I think people do need to think about it when they're investing. And I'm not saying that you don't want to lose money, obviously, but I think if you're trying to decide between things to invest in, I think it's worth looking at.
Can you give a few examples of this, like how this works in practice?
Yeah.
With companies that are out there? Because one of the objections would be, well, wait a minute, we need to make money. Why are we're looking at who aligns with us? How does this connect to making money?
Well, I'll talk about that. So one, let me just say this, investpolitically.com is actually the website for the ETF. So investpolitically.com, but it'll have all this information on there. But I didn't want to be the person deciding, is this company conservative or not conservative? I started saying, well, let's look at where they give their money, because money is what really matters. We just talked about money in politics. Where are these companies giving their money? I screened the S&P 500 for the top Republican supporting companies from their PACs and their employees. And I took the top Republican supporting companies at the federal level in the S&P 500 to create this ETF. I've also now added an overlay where I wanted at least half I want it to be US based, America first. I thought about it from the standpoint of number of employees that are based in the US. That number is not really readily available. That data is not. So I'm looking at least 50% of the assets have to be in the US. So this is America First ETF with contributing to Republicans. And I think that makes a big difference politically. And then if you look at the performance on it, I equally weighted these. And if you look at it on an equally weighted basis, it is outperforming the S&P 500 on almost every period that you look at, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year period. So it's done well. So again, over 11% a year compounded. In fact, we just hit our 52-week high today. Just over $50 a share, and I launched at $25 a share, and I've paid a dividend of 1.5% to 2% a year. So it's over doubled in 7 years, just being in the market. So, and again, I'm not asking people, I don't want people to lose money or give up opportunities. What we're trying to do is create other opportunities that also align with their values.
I love that. And Hal, you're not only in on the investing side, you also donate a lot to the Republicans as well. So I want to ask you where we are right now with about 20 days or so to go until the election. I mean, we are seeing Elon Musk, like we said, he put $75 into a super PAC for Donald Trump. How is that going down the stretch now in these crucial days?
Well, right now, it's all about voter turnout, right? I mean, you're not going to change anybody's opinion at this point. So that money that Elon Musk is spending, that I believe is all for voter turnout, focused in specific states. Pennsylvania is obviously a huge key state. There's other PACs focused on the same thing, getting those hard to reach. Maybe they vote once every 4, 6 years, 8 years. They don't vote that often, but they're Republican. You can identify them as a Republican. You get out there, it's door to door saying, hey, please get your ballot turned in. That's what's going on. That's where this money's spent. Television ads at this point, They're going to be all over the place, but I don't think that's going to move the needle. This is going to be getting those voters turned out, getting those early voters, getting those ballots turned, people to turn their ballots in and vote.
Do you have any thoughts about what's going to happen?
It looks good. I read a Brookings Institute, and they're certainly left-leaning. This was about a month ago, and it was a really interesting stat. They looked at 2016 and 2020, and if you looked at those two cycles, Trump outperformed his polling by 5 points in what they called the blue wall states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. So if you look at it now, if he's tied going in or slightly up is what he is right now in all those states, is he up by 5? Because that's what it was in 2020 and 2016. He outperformed that polling by 5 points. So in Michigan, as an example, in 2020, he lost Michigan, but he was predicted to lose by 7. He lost by 2. So that's what I mean by outperforming the final polling. So, it looks really good. He's polling now better than he ever has in either of the 2016 or 2020 cycles against the opponent.
Do you think in terms of fundraising now, just what you've seen over the last year, that how does that track with previous years?
Well, I mean, look, the Democrats have outraised us. It's certainly down ballot in a big way. They've at the top of the ticket. Trump was massively outraised against Hillary, though. So there's only so much that money can do. It's very important. Quite frankly, it's more important down ballot. And that's where a lot of this, are we going to pick up some Senate seats? I'm hopeful that if Trump can win Pennsylvania, do we pick up that Senate seat, right? Those are the kind of things that if he can win by enough in Arizona, can we squeak out a Senate seat in Arizona? Those are going to be the things to look at on election night. Obviously, we want Trump to win, and everybody's cautious here because we look at it and go, Pennsylvania's already announced they're not going to have election night results. So we're going to have to wait days to get their results, which is infuriating, okay? They're half the size of the state of Florida. Florida's going to have their election results within a few hours of the polls closing. And yet Pennsylvania's already said, oh, no, it's going to take us days.
It's the second world or third world. Really
it's unbelievable. And that is what creates the situation where people don't have faith in elections. If you go into those 2 or 3 days leading and you come out, they just keep counting ballots, that's a problem.
All right, we're here in Texas. You live here.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Senate. Everybody's trying to say Ted Cruz and Colin Allred, oh my gosh, watch out for this seat in Texas this time around. Every year, Hal, we hear about, oh, Texas is going to turn blue. You better watch out. Do we have to worry this year?
Well, it's close, but I think Ted's going to pull it out. I watched the debate the other night. He had a debate just last night. I think he just cleaned his clock last night. Colin Allred couldn't defend any of his votes. Ted kept going back to the record. Colin was more personal on his attacks. It wasn't record-oriented. Ted stayed focused on what the voting record was. I think he did an excellent job. Yes, I think he'll pull it out, but they want to spend this money. They spend this money here every single time the Democrats pump in. He's been outspent, I think, 3-1 here in Texas. And at some point, they're hopeful they're going to switch it, but I don't think it'll be this time.
Hal, tell everybody where they can find out more about your products.
Sure. Yeah. Investpolitically.com is the website for the ETF, and Point Bridge Capital is my firm, and I'm in Texas, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Very easy to find. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Hal.
Thank you.
When we come back, our next guest will explain why the scariest Halloween monster is adulthood. Stay tuned. We've been focused on the election, that it's easy to forget that Halloween is right around the corner. In a recent piece for Align, style writer O.W. Root explained that kids, try as they might, simply cannot draw scary faces. So why is that? He joins us now to discuss. And O.W., we're at the scariest time of the year. Why are kids unable to draw such scary things?
Kids can't draw scary faces because they haven't really seen a scary world. I mean, anybody who's a parent who has kids know that kids live in an innocent world, in a sweet world, in a small world that we create for them in a sense, and we protect them. And you can't write, or not write, but draw something that you haven't seen. And I realized this, or I thought about this when I was looking at drawings for my kids, that they try to be scary, but they aren't scary. There's something soft, something warm, something cute about them. And that tells us something about, or shows us something about their innocence.
Yeah, and this is such an important thought, I think, today. I was going to be a shameless father and bring in a drawing for this that my 6-year-old drew recently of Adam and Eve, and there was a big snake around the tree right? With both Adam and Eve with smiling faces. And she said, try them, T-R-I, try them with a smiling face. And I thought immediately of that picture when I read this piece. What do you think the deeper significance of this is in a day and age in which we see so much corruption and so much desire to sort of corrupt or pervert the minds of the youth at younger and younger ages?
I think that, I mean, it restates our responsibility as parents and our job as adults. And like you said, there are these forces, there are these ideas, these ideologies that seek to corrupt children at a younger and younger age. And I think it's easy for us to get sort of down and feel like things are helpless. But when we remind ourselves that we are in control of our families, we are in control of the culture that we have in our house, and the culture that we teach our children, it is emboldening in that way. And it reminds us of our job and the ability for us to do our job, which is to protect our children and create a world that is appropriate and conducive for their growth.
Well, kids all over the country, we see them on iPhones or iPads all the time these days. So what would you say the impact that technology is having on our kids and just their creativity and their ability to go out there and draw, to sit there and draw for a little bit?
I think the technological impact is really, really interesting because technology makes it so our kids are not bored. And in many ways, when you're bored, you have to make yourself unbored and you come up with things to do. And you create things, you come up with fantasies and you play act and you create a world and you dream and you imagine. And when your entire world when you're taking the world in, and it's just being blasted at you from a screen, you're a passive observer in your world, and you're not really daydreaming. You're not really creating. And I think there absolutely has to be a negative impact on children's creativity and children's childlike wonder.
Yeah, I absolutely have seen that. I mean, just in so many visceral ways. I mean, that picture I just talked about with my 6-year-old, she would not have done that if she had been on screens all day, right? Boredom led her to that, and then it came out of her, and she brought it to us. Can you talk a little bit about the role you think that parents and teachers play in fostering this? Because it strikes me that there's something nostalgic almost about your piece as well, I think. I mean, it's remembering those feelings and what it was like, right? To be that way, even when you were younger, is important. And then also protecting and sort of fostering that for healthy development in children.
I think that this sounds so strange to say because it's the most obvious thing in the world. And it's something that all of our parents knew, all of our grandparents knew, but kids don't do the same things adults do. I mean, this is very obvious. And we are on our phones because it's our job. I mean, all of us here, that's part of our job, is being on our phones. Kids don't have jobs. I mean, there's so many things that parents do, that adults do, that kids don't do. And it's this strange thing that I swear parents and adults have a hard time just, I guess, realizing or remembering that kids don't do everything that we do. And it's our job to make sure that they don't, in fact, do everything we do.
O.W. Reed, thanks so much for coming on and making us think every week when you're here on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll be able to wrap up the show right after this. Well, early voting has started in Georgia, and they have crushed the first day record. Matthew Peterson, when I looked at this story earlier today, I was like, oh, we have to talk about this because the previous record was 136,000 votes on the first day in Georgia, right? Today, or whenever this started yesterday, 328,000 votes were already cast in the state of Georgia, a critical swing state. And this shows, to me at least, that people are taking this election very seriously.
Yeah, it's like Hal just said, this is all about turnout now, and the race is on, and what we're going to see over the next few weeks is going to be extraordinary. It's going to be historic.
I did love the point that Hal was talking about with the social media companies, right? The Democrats, they have the advantage. They know everything about you. If you're on Google, anything you do on Instagram, on all the social media companies, they have that built-in advantage.
Yeah, people need to realize, I mean, this started a long time ago, as I'm sure Hal knows, when Google officials went to Obama and started working with them. Before, there was Russian collusion. I mean, Facebook was giving lists they were just interacting with the Obama campaign. So this was going on from the time they became these legacy media companies. And now you see, everyone in that world, they know when mistakes happen or things are flagged, right? It's for email, which is usually important for all of this. It always goes in one direction. So it's a great point. It's a terrifying point. It's something we ultimately have to change.
But when you look at that, when they have so much control and they already know that they have you there, that's why putting your money where your mouth is so important. And the politically responsible investing means so much that you don't just keep giving your money to companies that hate you.
Yeah, and sometimes Republicans or conservatives have a problem with, they feel like it's lefty language to talk about my company, changing the world in this way. But you see what happened with Musk, right? How important politically responsible investing is, right? I mean, this is world changing. It's also related to culture, and it is commerce. It is about making money. I mean, whoever supplants these tech companies, right, and is able to provide an equal playing field is going to make a lot of money. And that person is out there, right? These people are out there, but we have to start looking at it this way, as this is a commercial cultural movement moving in a different direction. And as consumers, as investors, we're going to start thinking about these things to make sure values align.
And hopefully they'll be doing it under a Donald Trump presidency. But Kamala Harris is out there right now trying absolutely anything that she can. It's like throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing if it will stick, Peterson.
Look, the main thing I just want to see is, as terrible as it will be, I want to have the drinking game, watching her and the cackling for 3 hours of Joe Rogan. I think her campaign would be over if she did that.
She has gotten to the point where she hasn't been cackling. They told her that doesn't play well. And to her credit, she stopped doing it.
Yeah, no cackling.
She has some self-control.
No witchy cackling was to get close to Halloween. She does, and actually I'm wrong. Even if she goes on Rogan, probably 40% of the people are going to vote for her anyway. Yeah. They would vote for an inanimate object over Donald Trump. So, okay, fine. But she's still floundering.
I listened to Mark Halperin on Tucker Carlson, and he said that no matter what, if Donald Trump wins, we will see the biggest mental health crisis of the lefties because they just won't be able to take it. And he's like, I'm serious, you guys. It's actually going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Well, the meltdown is real. I mean, the question is, to what extent do you see a full-on color revolution attempted, right? And the protesting and everything else revved back up. Is the energy there? I mean, you call someone literally Hitler for 8 years? I kind of think it is. So, Trump wins, and then, the real fun probably begins because they don't even want him to take office on Inauguration Day.
The real fun for us is right now. The lead up to the election, everything, every single day is just building and building and building. So be sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to rate and review the show. It helps everybody else to find it. We'll be back to break it all down tomorrow night.